Glen Davidson, it is all yours to get us launched for today.
Let's begin with prayer. O child of hope and sorrows, O child of love and pain, brighten today's world and renew our lives in your new dawn. Gather us together in the circle of your loving presence. Gather us together in the building up of community with gifts of kindness. Gather us together in the building up of community with yearning for truth. Gather us together in the building up of community with patience for listening with open minds and generous hearts. O child of peace, quiet our hurried minds and anxious souls, to love and to be loved in these uncertain times. O child of hope and blessings, hear our prayers. Amen. Like John Bunyan's Pilgrim, written at the time of one of London's plagues, most of us have been faced with pervasive tensions during this pandemic. And like Pilgrim, we've had to test and be tested to see what seems real and right. As people of faith, we've been challenged by questions like, who is my neighbor? And how can I love God with all of my mind, soul, and body? And these questions of faith may seem secondary or maybe even irrelevant when we're faced with our own and family's safety. As I mentioned last week, a recent study from Duke University's team researching the impact of the pandemic on people's beliefs and behaviors indicates that a significant minority of people of faith feel abandoned by God and very distrustful of their neighbors, maybe even members of their own family. Congregational care is now one of the most challenged ministries at Westminster, both as to focus and by volume of needs. The Congregational Care Steering Committee responded to these challenges by organizing this class as a way of hearing from as many members as will respond. What are our challenges? How are we adapting? And how are we being transformed? In our first session, we listened in to how frontline medical ethicists wrestle with the array of competing questions for people coping with the pandemic in clinical settings. In our second session, we heard how one of the nation's leading physicians researchers of the COVID-19 virus is attempting to understand exactly what confronts us and how we can best meet the challenges. In our third session, we reviewed how biblical records speak of how peoples of faith have been challenged by plagues and epidemics in the past, how they reacted, how they wrestled with the great commandment set forth by Jesus. In the fourth session, we reviewed how people of faith in more recent times have faced plagues and epidemics, and in the fifth session, what our predecessors in Tennessee and Nashville had to face. In our sixth session, we heard how some of our own members have moved beyond coping to adapting and provided some suggestions about how we can better meet our challenges. And last Sunday, we looked at the many ways our congregation has been transformed by reviving old and creating new ministries. These ministries have heard God's call to seek the vulnerable in answer to, who is my neighbor? And to learn again how we are to love God by responding to the vulnerable and their needs. Each of these sessions can be reviewed in recorded format on the church's website and the links for this class. Today, our challenge shifts. If Westminster's slogan is, every member has a mission, and we wrestle with how each of us defines our ministry, this is not the end of our quest in these times. Bunyan's Pilgrim, after all, was to discover that at the very threshold of his search for faithfulness, there's a trap door straight to hell. In modern understanding, some of us are discovering that in this very long pandemic, we find ourselves slipping into impatience, exhaustion, even cynicism or boredom as we seek to love God and our neighbor. And some of us just plain feel burned out. So how do we find the courage, strength, and endurance to continue our faithfulness? Leading us today is Elizabeth Trabue, a lifelong member of Westminster. In fact, I think one of the few, Elizabeth, who can claim to have even been baptized as an infant here. For the rest of us who don't know her, Elizabeth is a member of Session, a member of the Congregational Care Steering Committee, and a graphic designer by profession. She is willing to share some of the spiritual practices she sought and explored over the past 17 years. Following her presentation, we hope you all will feel free to share how even in burnout, we find restoration and transformation. So it's yours, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Glenn, for that introduction. And thank you, Heidi and Sylvia, for putting together this informative, engaging, and just transforming class. I know that I have really enjoyed it over the past 8 weeks. So when Heidi called me and asked me to speak for this class, I full disclosure here, the mere thought of it made me very nervous. As I've never really shared my spiritual journey in a large group public setting, but it felt right, and so I'm going to do this as we say in church with God's help. I will first say that I do not profess to be a teacher, only a practitioner and a seeker. However, I hope that by sharing my story and some of the spiritual practices that keep me grounded and sane and fulfilled, that it will offer some balm of comfort and information that may help you or someone you know and offer hope. So, like all of us, when the pandemic was taking hold at the end of February, around the beginning of March, I recall sitting in my den, consumed by the news reports that were coming out at a frenetic pace. I would watch Andrew Cuomo's daily press briefings. I found myself glued to those and snarfing down every news article I could find about the coronavirus. You know, was it safe to go outside? What about the piece of mail that I just touched? Would I have enough toilet paper? I found myself going to the grocery store and panic buying pasta and beans and frozen vegetables. And I even set up a makeshift extra pantry in my basement because I was buying so much food at one time. But more seriously, it became a question of what if one of my loved ones contracts COVID, or what if I contract it? And I just found myself shell-shocked, gripped by fear of the unknown. And as the days wore on and I was reflecting, I felt so unmoored from the spiritual practices that I had cultivated over the past 17 years. And I really paused, and I said to myself, you know, you've been in this position before, and you have the tools to do this, to get back up on the horse. So, you know, all of these feelings catapulted me back in time to March 2004, when, as a young mom at the age of 34, I was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. My kids were 5 and 22 months at the time. My son having been recently diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and my husband Clay and I, we were really just learning to walk through that. And so with the news of my diagnosis, we were facing months of chemo, radiation, surgery. You know, my world was turned upside down. I was overtaken by fear, anxiety, sadness, and a complete unraveling of my life as I knew it. The uncertainty, my own mortality staring me in the face were very hard to bear. The treatments began, and to be honest, they leveled me. But a host of family and friends and many members of Westminster stepped in, lifted me up, and walked me through the hardest days of my life. And there were so many people who prayed for me and my family. They brought food, prayer blankets, sent cards, and I saw this fullness of Christ's mission and Christ's love in action. It was at that time that I experienced what we hear about being born again and being made new in Christ. And it was out of these moments of darkness and despair and pain. Give me a second. Where I found so much light. It became a calling back to my baptismal covenant to seek and serve Christ and to love my neighbor as myself. So I made it through all of those treatments, and my life became what I would call new and improved. I became part of the very prayer groups at my children's school that had prayed for me, and it inspired me to closely study the Bible, to reactivate my church life. I taught Sunday school, regularly attended worship. I would come to the wonderful Westminster Wednesdays, worked on the team for Vacation Bible School. And I found this wonderful companionship and support in just the broad Christian community. So all that fear and anxiety and stress, I handed that over to God. And my life, all was going swimmingly. I was working, raising my kids, and then I was blindsided when the breast cancer returned in 2008. And I did the chemo and the radiation and the surgery all over again. Fast forward to 2011, and the cancer recurred for the second time. And while my faith never wavered, that second recurrence put me at just a new level of being overwhelmed. The stress and the anxiety stemming from the original diagnosis resurfaced. And I went searching for alternative and complementary therapies to manage all that comes with the burden of serious disease. So as we know, God sends his angels, and a friend mentioned a course that was being taught right down here on West End Avenue at the Osher Center for Integrative Medicine at Vanderbilt. And this friend of mine, she'd heard about it, and she said, I think this could be helpful. The course was called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, also known as MBSR. And it was an 8-part series. We met for several hours every Tuesday night. And I will say, I knew nothing. This was 2011. I knew nothing about mindfulness. I don't know that I'd ever really even heard about it. And I guess at that point, it was probably on the brink of becoming a household term. Now you hear about it everywhere. There are significant scientific studies that tout there's data backing up the tangible benefits of a mindfulness practice for the mind, body, spirit. And its effectiveness for controlling stress and anxiety are remarkable. So I'll give you a little bit of the details about the course. When I took it in 2011, it was led by Gordon Pierman. And some of you may know Gordon. He's an Episcopal priest, mindfulness teacher, and psychotherapist who's written several books about mindfulness himself. I'd like to take a moment just to say that after taking his course, I can't say enough good things about Gordon. He really became a spiritual mentor for me. And this course changed my life in so many ways, and positive ways that allowed me to move from merely coping and surviving to thriving. And so you might be asking, well, if you're not exactly sure what mindfulness is, there are so many definitions. It's kind of like defining love or grace. You could ask 10 different people and get 10 different answers, all good ones. I found a few that I liked best that I'll share with you here. One is from a book that I'll get to later. Mindfulness is deliberately paying attention to what is happening around you and within you, in your body, heart, and mind. Mindfulness is awareness without criticism or judgment. And here it is said another way. Mindfulness involves acceptance, meaning that we pay attention to our thoughts and feelings without judging them, without believing, for instance, that there's a right or a wrong way to think or feel in any given moment. When we practice mindfulness, our thoughts tune in to what we're sensing in the present moment, rather than rehashing the past or imagining the future. There's another passage I want to read, and this is in Gordon's book that I have over here as well. I'm going to share these at the end. His book that's called Blessed Relief. And he talks about this is when he's leading these retreats that he does at St. Mary's. But he says, we practice awareness of breathing, awareness of soundscape and the landscape, awareness of walking and sitting and moving and eating. We note the ever-changing contents of the mind stream, how the mind has preferences for and against the way things are. We practice inclining the mind to happiness, looking for the good, and choosing to take actions that lead to happiness. So in this MBSR course, I learned the fundamentals of mindfulness. I learned how to meditate and how to use a specific technique for breathing, what's called deep belly or diaphragmatic breathing that calms the body. It is my number one go-to this day when I need to counteract the flight or fight response and tap into my parasympathetic nervous system. In this class, I also learned Qigong, which is a mind, body, spirit practice that incorporates movement and breathing and meditation. And my yoga practice, which I'd begun several years before this, became even better when I layered the mindfulness concepts into it. And so as I moved through this 8-week course, studying and practicing and doing the homework, I started seeing immediate results in just my general sense of well-being. And I want to say that it was not easy. Our first homework assignment after the first class was over that entire week before we came back the next week. He said, I want you to pick one time to sit and meditate for 10 whole minutes. And I remember thinking, that is a really long time. And so on my first try, I think I made it about 30 seconds. But finally I got to that 10-minute mark, and then I think I made it to 20, and then I got to 30, and so on. And as I practiced it became such a refreshing way to clear my head and really feel invigorated in my body. And so there are many books that are out there about mindfulness. Again, I've got books I'm going to share with you at the end that I'm excited about. But there are also apps that you can download right to your phone three that are exceptionally good are Headspace, Calm, and Aura. And I think a couple of those are by subscription, but there are plenty of them out there that are free. They're wonderful just to have right there at your fingertips on your phone. But so in terms of just what I gleaned from cultivating a mindfulness practice, very much lined up with what the scientific research found. And for me, fear and anxiety, stress, even pain was either vanished or greatly diminished. And there was this inner sense of peace and calm and joy. And I would say joy in all caps. A big light bulb went on for me in understanding the mind-body connection. So the class, it is still, I looked it up. You can still take it at the Osher Center. I think now they're doing it online rather than in person. But it follows the format of a course that's taught in hospitals all over the U.S., maybe the world. That a man by the name of Jon Kabat-Zinn, he developed the course and really wrote the Bible on mindfulness. It's a book. It's not a real enticing title, but it's called Full Catastrophe Living, and it lays out a lot that you need to know about mindfulness. And so you might be saying, well, isn't mindfulness rooted in Buddhism, which it is. But it is not a religious practice. I've found that the spirit and the religion of the person doing it is what you bring to it. My teacher, Gordon, his book, Blessed Relief, the subtitle of his book is What Christians Can Learn from Buddhists About Suffering. And so he really writes in depth about the Christian approach to mindfulness. And there's also a link that was in the newsletter that came out with this class that also speaks to this and from that Christian perspective in a really substantive way. So that MBSR class opened a spiritual portal for me, and it was just yet another awakening and a deepening of my faith. And the cool thing is that it was this bridge to other spiritual practices in the Christian tradition, namely centering prayer and also a lot of deep spiritual study. So I'll shift now to talking a little bit about centering prayer. And we have a centering prayer group at Westminster, which is led by Heidi. It's also been led by Guy, and they have done a wonderful job in bringing the practice of centering prayer to our members, to our congregation. It is just, I'll go through the tenets of centering prayer, but it is based upon the wisdom saying of Jesus from his Sermon on the Mount that's in Matthew 6:6. When you pray, go to your inner room, close the door, and pray to your Father in secret. And your Father, who sees in secret, will reward you. So, I just a little bit about probably have heard of Thomas Keating, a Cistercian monk who he's kind of viewed as the principal developer of centering prayer, and he took a lot of his inspiration from Thomas Merton, whom many consider to just be one of the grand gurus of contemplative practice. And interestingly, Thomas Keating was developing sort of centering prayer as we know it today in the mid 1970s, right when Jon Kabat-Zinn was developing his MBSR course. So just a fun fact. So I'll go down kind of like with mindfulness and just talk about some definitions of centering prayer. And I think this was pulled from the brochure that I also included with the email. So what is centering prayer? Centering prayer is a way of cultivating a deeper relationship with God, a way to quiet the mind while maintaining alertness, and it can create a path of transformation. At its core, it is about finding the felt presence of God, of resting in God beyond our thoughts and emotions. It has been described as moving beyond conversation with Christ to being in communion with him. So I have found it to be just this really beautiful practice that incorporates mindfulness, but it's more about that, just that felt presence of God. And again, there's no right or wrong way to do it. I think it's the intention and the consent that just make it work, however it is going to work for you. The brochure, there are 4 steps of just kind of to begin practicing centering prayer, and that's also in that brochure. And it's, in terms of time, 20 minutes twice a day is recommended, but I found that 10 minutes once a day is helpful. There's also an app that you can put on your phone for centering prayer, and it's put out by the Contemplative Outreach Organization, and it's simply called Centering Prayer. I just discovered this, and it's really just a really wonderful tool. It's got a timer, it's got opening and closing prayers, and then there are background noises that you can have while you're sitting for your 20 minutes or your 10 minutes. It also has instruction, just your instructions for learning centering prayer are within the app. So I highly recommend that. I love that you can access it right on your phone, and you could do it if you're anywhere, really. If you're in your car, if you're in your home, if you're at work. So there is so much to say about the spiritual practices that I've discovered that have worked for me. I guess as I delved into these, I started developing to set patterns and habits in my day, so that was what kept me and still keeps me grounded. And so I begin each day with a devotional time, and I usually read a couple of devotions. One is this one, which is Forward Day by Day. It's put out by the Episcopal Church. And then we also have this one, which you can get at Westminster, called These Days. And so I start with the devotion. I also add in there Richard Rohr's daily meditations that you get by email. But I start that way, and then I try to do a little bit of meditation in the middle of the day. That doesn't always happen. And then I end the day with a little bit of centering prayer. So I think Glen mentioned in a couple of classes ago about something about chaos, and how you find, if you create patterns, you can move past that chaos if you have these patterns and these habits. And I thought that was a really good way of putting it. So I guess just to say, whether managing the ups and downs of cancer, everyday stresses, the pandemic, I've found the practices that work for me, but this is all such a deeply personal process, and what works for one person may not work for another. I really want to stress that. So I encourage you to just explore and to see what clicks for you. So I thought that I have all these books sitting over here that I've referred to during the talk. And so I thought I would just go through them briefly. I love books, and I learned so much by reading. That's kind of my preferred way, is just all these books that I have surrounding me. But okay, so I referred to my teacher, Gordon. So he wrote this book, Blessed Relief. Here it is right here. And I love this one because it's such a personal, it's his story, and he weaves in mindfulness practice techniques. It's just a wealth of information. So I really recommend that. Then I also referred to this one. This is the very thick Bible here on mindfulness, full catastrophe living. So, this is just a lot to digest. Really great. If you want to dive in, but I think it was written around, I think, 1975, and he revised it a couple years ago. Okay, now this book, this tiny little book here is great. It's called Mindfulness on the Go, and it walks you through, I think, a year, like maybe 52. So you do one a week. There are 52 mindfulness practices in here. And that, I really like this one. I actually just handed this one off to my daughter, and I had to go grab it out of her room to do this. But I really like this little book. I don't know where I found it, but hold on, let me think which one I want to move to next. Okay, so to moving into centering prayer. This is another one that's been by my side for a really long time, and it's Thomas Keating's book, The Daily Reader for Contemplative Living. And this follows a day-by-day format, and opens with scripture, and then has a devotion, and then closes with scripture as well. So this is very dog-eared. I adore this book. I can't really live without that one. The other one is called A Year with Thomas Merton, and it is taken from his journals from when up at the Abbey of Gethsemane, where he was in Kentucky. And I love this one because it moves along. He is so connected to nature, and he weaves all of that into his writings. And so I again, this one's been with me for a really, really long time, and I recommend it as well. Then here's another one that's great. I think some of you may have read Falling Upward by Richard Rohr. And he, again, he does his daily meditations. He's multiple, very prolific writer. This was maybe one of his first ones. But it speaks a lot about how how falling into the depths is really an opportunity to rise out of what we might perceive as our failings, and how to move beyond that. So again, that one's wonderful. And I think the last one I have here is An Altar in the World, which is by Barbara Brown Taylor. She preached at Westminster a couple of years ago. And I love all of her books. This one, I think I have the most things underlined and highlighted. And the thing I like about this one is that it's kind of a mindfulness book, in that it goes through daily practices about finding just the sacred in everything. And she just really makes it her words leap off the page, and you want to sit down and consume it all in one sitting. So I think that about covers what I wanted to say today. I think we're at Heidi. Are we good with time? It's 10:22. So I think
Elizabeth, we're phenomenal with time, but we're phenomenal in our spirits, because of what you have shared this day. And Terry Allen, you just sent in a chat message. You are such an inspiration to all of us, Elizabeth.
Oh, well.
I began your talk crying myself, along with you as your emotion came. And I have been lifted through all that you have shared and inspired. Yes, yes, comes in from Theresa Carl to centering prayer. Yes, yes, I heard from Nan Holland and Amy Dennison. While the group used to meet in room 209 at church, our centering prayer group, it's time to get it going on Zoom during pandemic. And Amy, you said you'd even help get that going again. So you're inspiring us not only to grow more deeply within ourselves, Elizabeth, but also, as Helen Lane has just written, thank you for all the resources, as we too will start, I pray, having some dog-eared copies of these spiritually wise authors who will ground us, whether it be cancer, whether it be pandemic, whatever, as Zinn calls it, Kabat-Zinn, full catastrophe we're going through, and they come in many forms in life, yes?
Right.
You have lifted us today. Friends, could we pause before we move into conversation? Feel free to unmute and join me in giving thanks for Elizabeth.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, Elizabeth, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And Amy has said that what used to be and probably may resume, Gordon Pierman, along with his wife until her death, was leading weekly mindfulness at Second Presbyterian Church in their sanctuary. That has continued on Wednesday nights at 5.
Right.
And he is doing it via Zoom. So he's already using that technology. Thank you, Amy, for giving us the link for that. I have attended myself during a challenging period in my own life, but it is not just for our challenging times, it's for our ongoing nourishment, yes, and groundedness. And Kelly, Gordon's meditation in his time, his Dharma teachings, as he calls them, using the Buddhist language, are very helpful. So friends, as we go to this open time of reflection, of conversation, may we begin first first of all, reflecting on anything you heard that sparked you from what Elizabeth has shared. And Elizabeth, you so deeply shared vulnerably of yourself and your own journey with us today. And I know that many of us on the call, it has connected with some deep and challenging times in our own lives, and how you have reconnected with practices that fueled you through a life-threatening period, yes, and re-engagement with those practices into this pandemic time now. So friends, questions, thoughts, comments you might have from what you heard through Elizabeth, as well as perhaps it sparked you to want to share with the rest of us how you too have gotten through some of the deepest, darkest times of your lives, and or are getting through this global pandemic now by engaging spiritual resources. What is nourishing you? The floor is open.
I just have a question.
Please, Theresa Carl.
How are you sharing these resources and practices with the rest of your family, and especially with your children? How is that? How do you do that? And have you been able to do that?
Well, so with Clay, with my husband, so he's my he's my constant sounding board, and I
he's
guess
my cousin.
That's right. Teresa and I are, he, how he's been such a wonderful support in encouraging me and really being my teacher and having this sort of innate knowledge himself. That's what's been the interesting thing, is that I'll share some sort of concept with him, and it's already there. So he I don't know that we practice I wouldn't say that we practice together, but it's just this dialogue that we have with my children. There are entire courses like mindfulness parenting, and I haven't taken that course, but I guess I figured I took this one. I thought, well, I think I've got the basics here, but I do try to share that with my kids because of what, their ages are 22 and 18. And so early on, I really tried to apply that to the way that the mindfulness concepts to the way I parented, and then to teach them in the basics of it in handling their own lives. So that's ongoing. The book, the little book that I just referred, that my daughter, I guess when she got home from college back last month, she was having a lot of anxiety about the pandemic and all four of us being in the same house and coming from different places. And I handed her that book, and we talked, and I encouraged her to try some of the practices in that book. And it really helped. It really helped. And she's much better than she was a month ago. So I saw it in action. Yeah.
Heidi, I have a question. It's Kelly. Oh,
Kelly Christie, please.
for Elizabeth. Elizabeth, and many of you on this call can relate to this. I have a niece that her breast cancer has come back, colon, liver, lung. Dear friends who are struggling with recurring cancer. What can supportive, loving friends and family members do? What was the most helpful to you? Spiritually, the meditation would be so helpful to her, and I've sent her those resources. But was it people reaching out often? Was it people just being there? I'm just not sure how to be as supportive a friend and a family member and an aunt through this, and not be irritating or
Right.
depressing,
Right. Yeah. Well, first, I hope I will pray for her. I think just being a loving support and offering, being helpful. We had so many people who brought food to this house. That was a huge help. That just, that was just tangible. Okay, how can we get through every single day here at the house with little kids? And so everything from the food to going to pick up dry cleaning to even doing grocery shopping, all of those things were really helpful. Also, one of the best parts of the day is I'd walk out to the mailbox, and there would be all these cards from people. And I loved it. It just was, it was like this time of year where you go out to the mailbox to get the Christmas cards. And it's so exciting. But I would go out, and there would be these beautiful notes that people had just written from their heart. And I have saved every single one of them. They are in this chest in the house. And so, I think just offering that just loving support is the best thing that you can do. Yeah.
Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth, what you shared in response to Kelly's question, and Kelly, might I lift up for all on the call that Shannon, your precious niece, is part of our prayer team's prayers regularly. And that is a good, yes, and we continue as you give us updates about Shannon. Elizabeth is our new leader of the prayer team. So I want to share with everybody on this call that we actively pray for all the prayer requests that come to us. And during this time when we're not sitting in the pews and can take that wonderful little prayer card, right, and fill it in, please feel free to reach out to me, to Elizabeth, to any member of the staff, so that our prayer team can be in active prayer. which links to Elizabeth, the meals, the errands, the cards in the mailbox. You shared earlier that so much of that came in and through the ministries of care and compassion of Westminster. Yes?
Yes, yes.
And that they led you into the care and nourishment you needed. They also led you into a sense of your own sense of mission into the world. So I'd like to invite Sylvia. We were going to pivot at some point in the class, so this conversation will certainly continue. Sylvia, you were going to lift up what are the needs you all are sensing? Sylvia's chair of Congregational Care Steering Committee, to speak about how we've moved from coping in pandemic to adapting our ministries, to even increasing and transforming our ministries, as Glen mentioned in the beginning. Sylvia, why don't I pass the baton to you?
Thank you, Heidi, and thank you, Elizabeth, for all those ways and means. I've got your list of books I'm getting on Amazon as soon as class is over. We're going to order them all. But for the personal disciplines that ground us and give us that strength to go on, because as we've learned through this course, is the path from coping to adapting to transforming. It's not linear for many of us. We're going, at points we're going back to the beginning, and we're having to cope all over again, adapt all over again as family members become ill or friends pass with this illness. And we've learned that Jesus very often went into the desert for that personal discipline, for that time alone with God, for communion with God. And that gave Jesus the strength to go back to the cities, to heal and to teach, to feed the people. And so I think we have our personal disciplines that we so need to rely on to commune with God. We have our communal disciplines, that corporate prayer and worship. We still have worship together Wednesdays and Sundays. We have the sacraments, communion and baptism. We still have classes of teaching and hospitality. But what we've learned also is, you hear that little meme, whatever, we're all in the same storm, but we're not all in the same boat. Our church, many of us have the means, financial means. We've got health insurance, we've got family for backup. We have, we can go to the store and get our curbside pickup, but there are so many within our congregation who cannot. Not just our elderly friends, but those with chronic illnesses, or those who have lost their jobs or have had cutbacks, who need help with food, with rent. And that's where our congregational care comes in. And as Heidi was saying, we have expanded our ministries, and I'm hoping that I'll list off the ministries that congregational care has. So if you feel, and you don't have to join a committee or very committee oriented at Westminster, but it's, Elizabeth was saying, and Heidi, you can be the individual that makes the phone call, makes a text, an email, that sends a card. I love snail mail. I'm like Elizabeth. And pray for your friends and family, but let them know you're praying for them. That's such a gift. I think it's a sacramental gift in itself when someone tells you they are keeping you in prayer. And do those the door drop-offs where you just drop, and you don't have to do a meal train. That's very good if you do, but you can drop off just little unexpected things for those folks in your life, food, or do errands, run errands for them, do pickups. But we do have lots of organized ways at Westminster where you can be involved in congregational care. And the first is the prayer ministry, and Elizabeth is with, we are so thankful for Elizabeth coming and building this up. And if you would like to join with Elizabeth, they have Zoom meetings. Yes, where you are spiritually lifted yourself as the prayer team, and then you lift up and pray over the people who send not just their needs into you, but their special joys and celebrations that you can pray over. We do have special meals ministry. We've had a lot more people in need of meals during the pandemic. So a lot of those can be related to surgeries or illnesses at home, but at the same time, people are confined. Some of our folks are in their 90s and can still drive. We probably wish they weren't, but they are in need of meals to give their caregivers a break, even who are bringing, cooking for them every day, to give the caregivers a break in cooking. We have the worship flower delivery still. After services, those flowers, those beautiful, gorgeous arrangements are broken down and delivered to our people who are in residencies or at home. We still have a hospital visitation ministry. We've always gone to the rooms in the past and taken our those little beautiful felt blankets that we have that have the Westminster mission prayer on them. So now we call, we can send cards, we can still take that blanket over once they get home. We can't do those in hospital visitations. And for the folks that get home from hospital, we have a wonderful lending closet, everything from crutches to portable bedside commodes to the knee cart where you kneel and roll yourself around with your knee, anyway, all kinds of devices that you can use. We have, and it's not just for Westminster family. If you know anybody in the community, they are welcome to come to we can get those from the lending closet for you. We just sign it out and you can return them when you're through with them. We have the Caring Connection ministry, and that is for people that have left the hospital. We used to be able to visit them in rehab, and now we, of course, aren't able to do that. But again, we have cards and texts and emails and phone calls. We help with meals. We deliver devices from the lending closet, and we keep in touch with those folks for weeks and months as they journey on that recovery. And then as a team, as the Caring Connection team, we do keep all of our friends in prayer and let them know we're keeping them in prayer. Let's see. And then for folks, for grief and bereavement, that is a new ministry. We don't have the ability now to meet in the parlor and do those wonderful family and friend connections and stories and memories and laughter and tears that we share together. Heidi put together a wonderful All Saints new tradition. I hope that we keep it on, that she gathered folks in the columbarium on All Saints Sunday. We had the service streamed and we had an evening service streamed, but Heidi gathered people in the columbarium where they could tell their stories and share not just about folks who've died in the past year, but have died years ago and are still so missed and lost. Those feelings of loss still remain. And would have had candles and votives, but it was a windy day, so they got to take their votives home. But Elaine Williams is now leading the grief and bereavement ministry. So remembering people on those special days, those anniversaries, and sending cards and remembrances. We're working on communion at home ministry. We used to, the elders would take the hosts, we had little kits, the host and the little juice glasses and all. We'd go to homes where people were homebound, or we'd go to the facilities, take the communion and the liturgy and the word of the day and share that communion with our members. And now we're working on doing those, as Donovan calls them, the little Arby's packets with the communion and juice together. We could take those and the liturgy, deliver them to the home, and then elders could make the phone call and share that sacrament with folks. We have special care ministry. And that is of course long distance, but special care teams that we had in the past were folks that needed a lot more, were more in intense need of spiritual, physical, communal care. So we would have a whole team of people supporting that one individual or the individual in the family. And again, that now is kind of combined with care and connections and special meals, and we're all kind of attacking from different angles the needs of that family. Families with Children ministry is new, and Katie Lee has a team together. We're looking for new members to join with that. And is it 22 families that have been helped so far, Heidi?
Yes, 22 families we have reached out to for their needs, and we now are reaching out to some new baby families where meals in particular are needed as they go through sleep-deprived days and weeks.
And we also have independent living teams and pastors' aids ministry. And those are for folks who are in retirement facilities, assisted living, living at home, but it needs of different levels of care. So independent living team is at one level and pastor's aid a little more intense. So that briefly is congregational care, but outside of the church walls, we still have global engagement and global disciplines that we can engage in. And through Hands-on Mission, that's a team chaired by Ralph Wheeler. We have 29 agencies and mission partners that benevolence ensures that those agencies have the funding that we can provide for them to keep their missions going. Hands-on Mission allows us to actually get our hands involved. And that's everything from the food drives that we've had for Second Harvest, the food drive that was in conjunction with Hands Home Connection to supply food for the 2 communities or 2 counties in East Tennessee. We had clothing drives. We have rooftops that helps. Lisa Woolley is one of the founding members of Rooftops, which is for helping people with rent so that they are, they face eviction. They're 1 paycheck away from eviction. Rooftops ensures that they're going to stay in that home at least 1 more month. We have Home Connection that's making those home repairs to keep people in their homes and to keep affordable housing on them available. And we have global missions. We have Heart for Africa, My Story Speaks. A really great way to get involved right now is to get on the alternative Christmas gift market. We have that up on through the Westminster, our website. Yeah, thank you. And there are 16 missions right now who are highlighted, from a minute video to descriptive of what the mission is about, how you can serve, and then ways that your dollars from $25, $50, $100, $15 can make such a difference in that mission, and how your children can learn about the ways that gifts don't have to be little boxes wrapped up and slipped under the Christmas tree. There are so many other ways to share your love and your gifts. And I think that's about all for the different ways that we are engaged, not just within the church, but globally. So I know that everybody's getting so fatigued right now, and there are so many calls upon us to so start with your personal disciplines. Go back to your closet and pray, and
Sylvia, that's an excellent a summary that, as T.S. Eliot once wrote in a poem, you know, we come back to the beginning and we know that place for the first time, right? As part of our journey. I want to give a formal, informal closing, but invite anyone who wants to remain on the call, because we do have some other things that I know you all want to share. As we continue to sense how God is transforming us, not only individually, but as a congregation. But let us pause for a moment to first give thanks for Elizabeth Trabue, who reminded us again, we need to go back to the beginning, that place of loving God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength, Matthew 22, to go to our prayer closet, to be nourished and filled, where we are also called to go forth to love our neighbor as ourselves, to be the one sending those cards to the mailboxes and bringing those meals, yes, and dropping off food for Second Harvest. All the ways that Sylvia has shared through congregational care and hands-on mission and beyond. We've also been reminded by Glen that, as Pilgrim needed to discover in John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, that the burnout trap doors, yes, that could lead to hell, to burnout, to exhaustion, not be ones that we fall through, but that we be communally upholding one another as we seek our own missions individually and corporately. So let us give thanks for Elizabeth, and to our major planning task force members, Glen and Sylvia, and all our presenters who may still be on this call from previous weeks. We give thanks, and we give thanks for one another.
And thanks to you, Heidi.
We were interested, friends, and let me respond to a comment made in a chat. Thank you, Glen. It certainly has been a team effort, and we felt that perichoretic dance of the Holy Spirit leading us to each week, haven't we? Yeah. And many of you on the call, I'm looking at Rory, who's texted me multiple times saying, just being in this Zoom class has helped to feel a deeper sense of connection and intimacy to the congregation. Yes, Rory? Yes. A lot of people have been feeling that as we see into each other's homes and even share our hearts with one another in vulnerable ways. It's been profound. Someone asked, I think it was Suzanne Allen, asked me privately in the chat, will we be sharing all the wonderful resources that Elizabeth has shared today? Many of them you will find on yesterday's congregational email standalone, but after today, we'll have one final wrap up, thanks to Chris Pardue. So if you're interacting with Chris, thank the amazing Chris as well. She's responsible for taking all the recordings and downloading them into usable form. And so we'll have 1220, today's class, every book that Elizabeth has mentioned, some mindfulness practice guidance, yes, and centering prayer guidance. And as we'll also get the centering prayer group going in the new year. And while Sylvia was inviting you to join in, right, to these congregational care ministries, we also want to hear from you where we may be missing some needs that you may have yourself or your loved ones or your friends in the church, or just needs you're aware of that God is calling us corporately to respond to. Please share your feedback with us. We also hope, didn't we, Glen, that we could hear from each other, or any of you, have you heard through these 8 weeks a new call from God to serve, to care, to engage, or to share your own life with others? Susan Hassel, yes, Chris will put, and Susan Hassel, let us identify you. Susan Hassel is chair of the Adult Education Committee and works closely, very closely with Guy Griffith, our associate pastor for adult education. So Susan, yes, we will make sure Chris puts this page of resources on the website, absolutely. Anybody sensing? How can we? Elizabeth inspired us today. Have you felt any newfound inspiration? One of you, Theresa, you already said, I want to join the prayer team. No good. Holland, you said in the chat, you've been the recipient of the Caring Connections Ministry after your lumbar spinal fusion surgery, and we're continuing to love and pray and care for you. So from either the I want to get involved or I have had a need and received, please share what sparked you. How might we be transformed going into 2021? This
Heidi?
pandemic, please, is that Cynthia?
It's Cynthia. I sure hope the camera doesn't come on right now, but
It isn't, but we hear your wonderful voice, and I hope you're going to share what you shared with me Friday.
well, no, I wanted to say that one of the most amazingly meaningful things to me recently was a poem that Sylvia wrote and posted on Facebook yesterday that speaks directly to what we're talking about how to help and get out in the world and during the pandemic. And I wonder if either she would read it to us as we close, but I'd love for all these people to hear the poem she wrote.
And Sylvia, do you have it?
It's upstairs, Cynthia.
Uh-oh. Well,
Well, maybe you could even share some of the sentiments in just a moment. But Cynthia, because I learned from Cynthia, because I'm not like Donovan and have multiple screens in front of me at once, I missed seeing her wave her hand. So Cynthia, you were going to share it publicly. I'd like to lift up your piece of being aware and that has come to you through pandemic of what it's like to sort of be in the gaps of not being in a sense of couple or in a family. And sometimes we as church think so much in family. What is it like to be in a single household? Yes. And
yes.
how are others navigating this time? And how you want to help us in this coming week. And I'm helping you come up with a list to reach out to share how you are navigating and provide support to one another in this holiday week. Right, Cynthia?
Yes.
I call that a gift from the Holy Spirit that made you aware through your own need about the needs of others, and you're directly offering to connect with others in this time. What a gift. So
Well,
friends,
it occurred to me as I've gone through these 8 weeks of these wonderful sessions with this group that there are a lot of people who will be alone for Christmas this year as a result of the pandemic, who normally would travel to or be with family. And I was one of those people. And I began to think, what is it going to be like without my church services or singing or just seeing people? What will it be like to be on Christmas alone this year? And so I reached out to Heidi and said, there are undoubtedly people in our midst who will be alone, and they're totally unfamiliar with that during the pandemic. And I would be delighted to pull a team together to just phone some of our members who will be alone that we know of and just give them a word of hope, a word of positive reinforcement, and a feeling of community. So that was the thought.
it's a beautiful thought, and I call that Holy Spirit work. And that's every member has a mission response. Cynthia, you're inspiring me.
Well,
Thank you for sharing that.
yes, indeed.
Was that Sylvia trying to share her poem when I saw a screen share coming up? That's not. Okay, Glen, you began us. You helped us see how in the end it is the beginning. And when we come round to that place, we often know that place for the first time. Glen, would you please share with us some words that lead us to this wonderful place of summation today?
Well, I think the thing that with which we started was to recognize that the Congregational Care Committee needs help and feedback from others, that objective has been met, and I want to thank everybody for helping us. I want to thank Sylvia for her leadership. She's given so much time, not only to the actual care activity, but for the involvement of this class. And Heidi, you have just been such a trooper and helping us pull these things together. So to us all, I want to say thank you so much and Merry Christmas, a blessed Christmas.
A Merry Christmas, yes. And to Glen, we thank you, our resident medical anthropologist, theologian, Christian brother, friend. We are grateful for you on all those fronts. It has been a creative time. Friends, even amidst pandemic, the light shines in the darkness. And as we walk toward this Christmas Eve and Christmas, may we be instruments of Christ's light. May we look for Christ's light in new and creative ways. May we be inspired to be still and look for the star, leading us to Bethlehem and leading us from Bethlehem with a new song in our heart. Because we are nourished in and through God's good news in Christ. We are nourished in and through God's calling to be God's people together, Westminster. What a gift that we have each other. And we are called and nourished as we are sent forth to love our neighbor and serve the world. May we be those people responding to the needs of the vulnerable and doing so with renewed energy and love in God, who shows himself to us in Jesus Christ. God bless you. Yes, Glen. Merry Christmas all. A blessed Christmas. Please do unmute. We need to say it to each other. We're not going to all be in church together this year, friends. Can we say it?
Merry Christmas.
Merry
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Oh, I love the litany. Yes. Merry Christmas and peace on earth, goodwill to all. God bless you all.
Thank
Love
you,
to
Heidi.
all.
God bless.
Thank you.
God bless.
Thank
you soon.
Bye.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Merry Christmas.
Bye bye.